Hey, it's Tony Vitello with the Tennessee Vols, and you're listening to the No Playbook Podcast.
All right. Hey, thanks for checking out the show. It's the podcast where we talk with the outstanding athletes, coaches, and experts that help to make sports and fitness such an important part of life here in the Southeast. Coach Tony Vitello, he's a man that needs no introduction. The Tennessee baseball coach joins me on the podcast today to talk about just what a typical day looks like for him in the offseason. We give out some superlatives to some of his past players on the team, and we talk a little bit about just who he is outside of baseball. If you're a fan of Coach Vitello's, make sure you stop by the D1 training tent in Vol Village at Tennessee football games this season. We're going to have a chance for you to sign up to win an autographed baseball from Coach Vitello. And we'll at least be doing that for the next couple of games, UTSA and then before the South Carolina game. But we might have more throughout the season, so make sure you stop by to check us out there in Vol Village. Please do me a favor, take a second, give me a rating, and write a short review for this podcast wherever you are listening right now. It really doesn't take long, and it helps so much. Bumps the show up so more folks can find it more easily. Podcast now available on YouTube, so check it out there, as well as TikTok and Instagram at No Playbook Pod. And just a quick note for context, we actually recorded this podcast the day before Tennessee's home football game against Austin Peay. I've got Tony Vitello coming up right after this. Sit tight.
Recruit Me puts the recruiting process in your hands. Most student athletes wait for college coaches to discover them, but coaches are busy and don't always have the time to find them. Recruit Me allows you to build an online profile to share directly with college coaches and is designed to help you enter all of the information coaches want to see. Your stats, your highlight videos, your academic information, your social links, and more. Plus, our team is here to make sure that your profile stands out with personalized suggestions. With over 25,000 coaches in our database, our premium plan gives you access to D1, D2, D3, and NAIA coaches across the country, and more importantly, gives them access to you. Enter your schedule of games and tournaments to let coaches know when and where you're playing so they can come out and watch you shine. Then communicate with interested coaches via our chat feature. When it comes to recruiting, don't make coaches research you. Do the work for them. Get started today at the Recruit Me app, on the web, and in the app stores.
At D1 Training, what we do is in our name. Our D1 athletes become D1 athletes. Whether it's Los Angeles Angels pitcher Ben Joyce, high school soccer national MVP Brindley Murphy, or first-round NFL draft pick Cole Strange, we help all athletes reach their full potential. Five-star training system comes straight from D1 strength and conditioning programs, and D1 has trained over 2,000 professional athletes. Many of them started as young as 7 years old. Check out D1Training.com to learn more about their facilities in Hardin Valley and Sevierville, and coming very soon to Maryville and the Tri-Cities.
Coach.
How we doing?
Good. How about you?
Not too shabby. Bouncing all over the place this morning. Going to be a busy weekend with the first home game. Obviously, recruiting stuff involved.
Oh, yeah. You have players in town?
Yeah, we've got a few official visits and then a couple unofficial visits, so it'll be about 5 bodies.
That's kind of cool. I think it's something that people probably don't think about. Is even off season, you're staying super busy.
Yeah, I mean, these football games would be something I would love to enjoy and act like I'm in college again, or just sit back and relax. But they're work for us. So when a unique one comes along, like a bowl game or something like that, it's double the amount of fun because you don't get to have it on the regular game days.
Yeah. So what do you do? So you're sitting next to a kid on an official visit. Do you, tassel their hair and smack them on the butt and say, "Hey, go Vols," or how does that go?
No, I mean, we lead them over to the field and typically, either bring them down on the field and or lead them to their seats. At halftime, we'll meet for food. During the game, we allow them to sit, by themselves. But by the time you get to your seats, you're late, and then you got to leave early for the halftime food. And then you typically have to leave the game early because of, whatever the next thing is on the itinerary. So the actual sitting and watching the game goes very fast. And of course, for us, fortunately, we've done well enough. You're shaking some hands and talking to some people and things like that.
Oh. Hey, I was just talking with Josh Mancuso.
Yeah, he's a stud.
Yeah. So he did an episode of this podcast. We've connected, and he said you guys got together. Was it earlier this week?
It was, gosh dang, yeah, 2 days ago. So the week's gone by fast, but yeah, we hooked up, and I've seen some of his stuff. I mean, I don't get on social media, but I've seen some of his work, and gonna try and get over to his show when he's here in town too.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Did y'all make like a real silly video?
Yeah, it was plenty silly, that's for sure. I kept thinking like, how am I going to come off saying what he's got me saying, or whatever it might be. But I think it worked out fairly well.
Good. I'm looking forward to seeing that. What about the rest of your like off season? I think we talked about the recruiting, but like like the training schedule, stuff like that. What else are you guys doing in the fall, for instance?
Yeah, for us, it's a period of official or in-season practice that you're waiting for. Everybody begins it at a different time, but for us, we usually do the end of September. Tennessee weather combined with the turf allow us to go late into the fall or even the beginning of the winter with our, again, official period. So it's almost like an orientation or initial period in the weight room, specifically condition these guys on how we like to do things here, and then let them play. And the scrimmages take up an enormous amount of our time. And then at the end, we can address some individual things, get back in the weight room. So it's almost kind of divided three sections, with the biggest section being that scrimmage part of the year.
I was really curious to hear because, of course, I'm with D1, and we've had so many Tennessee and other D1 baseball players work out with us. So, like both of the Joyce brothers worked out here starting like in middle school, and even future Vols, like Brooks Wright, for instance, at Bearden right now, Tennessee commit. He's here so many times per week. I'm curious how if you see benefits to that, like once they make it to you, does that make these players more durable, or how does that work?
I think regardless of where it's at, whether it's their junior college, their program they came from, high school baseball, where they train, you can divide the guys into pretty much two groups: guys who are prepared and guys who are not. And obviously, we want players that are skilled here, that are good students, that meet all the things we're looking for. But you only have so much control on what's going on in the hours outside of our campus or leading up to being here. And the guys who are prepared, because there's a lot of different ways to do stuff, but knowing how to work and having the ability to do some of the exercises that our guys are going to do, or some of the things that are required of our guys that are a big commitment. You can tell the ones that are prepared and the ones that are not. Now, speaking to those examples in specific, if you're a Vol fan in general, or you train, with you guys, you need to see pictures of what the Joyce brothers look like in high school. And now compare to the RoboCop or Terminator bodies, or however you want to describe those two guys. It's insane, the progression from A to B. And then Brooks Wright, the good thing for us is because he's training, he's not become one of those, stories we're all fearful of. You commit a kid at a young age, and then he goes backwards for whatever reason. He's not only kind of stayed a skilled player, but his body has changed, just posture wise, movement wise, in a positive fashion, which allows us to get more excited about what's coming.
I can certainly vouch for his dedication, and he's in the gym working hard a lot in weird hours too. When you and I were in school, like you were in school and then you did work either before or after. I'll see kids here working out, and it's 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and aren't you supposed to be in school? I don't know how that works, but they're dedicated.
Yeah, online classes are different now, but also the word you mentioned, dedication, is different. It's not like guys weren't working hard in the past, but now it's so difficult to be a two-way player in baseball or a multi-sport athlete, in particular at a collegiate level, because you're going up against guys that are dedicated at a total different level than even when I was growing up. And that means when there's a free hour, whether it's at lunchtime or in the morning when you get out of bed, if you're not training, probably somebody is who might be the guy that's your competition somewhere down the road.
Yeah, man, they're going to set themselves apart and take that next step for sure.
No question. And ultimately, that's what we're all looking for is an edge. I know Patrick Mahomes came up short last night, which is shocking. But what he's done, I think, stems from a background of being around a big league clubhouse with his dad being in Major League Baseball and seeing what it takes to have an edge and stay playing at a high level, regardless of what sport it is.
Did you ever watch the Netflix show Quarterback?
I did, and Peyton was here recently because he was teaching a class, which I wish I would have known that earlier. I would have went in there and maybe done some heckling, or at least seen how he is as a professor. But he came over and spoke to our guys. It was great to kind of meet with a group of the outfielders, and we talked about that special because he helped produce it. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks that were willing to put their lives on camera, but those three that did, it was interesting how different they are. And it was phenomenal to see the routines, excuse me, and the dedication that Patrick Mahomes has.
Yeah. And Kirk Cousins, I gotta say, I got a lot of respect for him during that too.
He's a different cat, but he's now beloved because of that show where, I'm not a Vikings fan, so I know who he is, but I don't know who he is when that helmet comes off. And now people realize how he plays through pain, how good of a dude he is off the field. And again, even though he's unique in how he does it, he's a great dude in that locker room.
Yeah. Are you you're a St. Louis guy, right? So did you stick with the Rams or do you have a different team you follow?
Such a weird deal. The Cardinals, which a lot of kids I coach, our kids don't realize the Cardinals left when I was about 7. They used to play in the old Busch Stadium where the baseball Cardinals played. And then the Rams came when I was in college. So that gap in between, and even when I was younger, was the Chicago Bears. Walter Payton was my guy, and my dad is from Chicago. We still to this day have family tickets that are season tickets for the Bears. So when I was little, I loved watching all sports and every team, but I had a lot of Chicago influence, even though I was in St. Louis because of my dad, which led to me, you better be able to debate and argue a little bit at a young age if you're gonna mix those two cities up in any way.
Yeah, that was part of the fun of it too.
No,
who are
I
your
could have
favorite?
started a podcast back then between Cubs and Cardinal fans.
Yeah, who were your favorite Cubs players back in the day?
Andre Dawson by far, and then my dad actually got me to be able to meet him one day. I had to go into Wrigley by myself as a younger kid. I can't remember the age, but I was really young, and getting to meet him was unbelievable. And then Greg Maddux, I was an infielder, but back when I was still pitching a little bit, Greg Maddux was coming up, and he used to throw hard. Most people don't know that, but I was a big Greg Maddux fan. He was a heralded rookie when he first came in, and many good years after that. And Braves fans don't realize it, but he was a pretty good Cub for a little while too.
Heck yeah, man. Those teams with those guys, Mark Grace, Sandberg, Sean Dunston even.
Oh yeah, Sean Dunston's arm across the infield was something to behold. But of course, being in St. Louis, no matter what team you're cheering for, if you don't like Ozzie Smith, something's wrong with you. Just an insane athlete, great defender. And then he was so involved in the community. He had no business coming to the neighborhood I lived in, but he was there. Our neighbor had a disability, and he would come over with Willie McGee, and they would do things with that family. Tremendous dude, and quite the culture. Culture gets thrown around a lot as a word for coaches and programs. Whitey Herzog had about as good of a culture going with that St. Louis Cardinals team for almost a decade as you can possibly imagine.
Yeah. Well, talking about St. Louis, so your dad, Greg Vitello, in the St. Louis Hall of Fame. I was curious to hear, what coaching lessons did you learn from him? Do you ever hear his voice if you're shouting on the field?
There's no question. I can hear it right now. So I think, for me, a lot of the lessons he was trying to instill in guys he was coaching were life lessons and lessons that would serve them regardless of how the game's going, what their role is on the team. And you're so short-sighted when you're younger that a lot of them didn't realize it, but they'll stop him on the streets now. I mean, we can't go anywhere in St. Louis without him running into somebody that he coached. And now they get it. And for me, I was a parallel to that. It took me so long to kind of adopt or embrace the things he was trying to instill in me and my sisters and the kids he was coaching. But it finally hit home that work ethic can serve you in a bunch of different ways. And also, losing should hurt, and it should hurt because you're incredibly invested in what you're doing. And then also just what intensity is and what it means and how important it is. And there's different ways to execute it. So I could go on and on about a bunch of different traits he instilled in so many different people. But I think the work ethic thing and the intensity thing, and also just a distaste for losing, are three things that pop into my head off the bat.
Yeah. So obviously that intensity you bring to the team here in Knoxville. I've wondered in the past, when you get tossed, are you over, wringing your hands thinking I shouldn't have done that? Or are you thinking, I hope this motivates the team? Or, you know what I mean? Because we don't get to see you after you're gone, obviously.
Yeah. And I think there's been occasions where if it's at home, my dad will, speaking to him, he'll come down and want to check on me. And at the end of the day, I think one thing that's helpful for athletes and coaches to know, when you come to the park, there is so many things, or the field, there's so many different things that can happen. And you have to realize those outcomes ahead of time, and it'll help you on the back end. So I certainly never come to the park saying I'm going to get thrown out today. But when it does happen, you have to move on to the next thing. And you're either going to have to handle handing out duties to the assistant coaches or preparing for the next day, or how are you going to talk to the media and things like that. So it's always got to be next thing for coaches and players. And, my vibe afterwards depends on how things went down. As an assistant coach, I remember one that was stemmed from, players on the field. Last year, there was a situation where, or I should say, a given year where I really didn't try and even argue and don't feel like it was warranted. But hey, I'm not criticizing anybody. We're all dudes that are competing at a high level in the SEC, and everyone's just trying to do their job, umpires included. But there's different ways or circumstances things can go down, and that'll lead to the emotions or the vibe that's left afterwards.
Yeah. I'm possibly thinking of the one you're referencing.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes, as a head coach, you find yourself being too stoic, but you're wanting to, at least show your players or other coaches you can't get too high or too low. And maybe in doing that, you cap emotions too much personally, and they spill over at times. And at times you get too frustrated or too down, or other times, you go into the stands and act like an idiot because you want to high five the fans because you appreciate they helped you win. There's just different things that go on. But at the end of the day, this is just, I've called it recess because I've heard some of the overreactions to either celebrations or Drew Gilbert did this or we did. This is just recess. I mean, there's so many things that are serious in life. And one thing that catapulted our team onto the scene was during COVID, when the whole world needed recess. We started to have some success and have some fun moments in our games, even in losses. So I think perspective is huge. And, who I am and who our players are when we're not wearing a uniform is totally different than who we are when we're on the field. And I think that's the case for most great athletes. I mean, Patrick Mahomes he had a little puppy dog in that Netflix special when he's looking at his new house and he's with his family. But he's an absolute killer when he's on that field with a helmet on.
Right. So you talk about perspective. It makes me think of something I like to bring up with folks a lot is kind of on a personal note, like 14-year-old Tony. What would he think of you now? Like, would he and mostly what I'd like to hear is any kind of advice you might have for somebody that would look at a career like yours and say, that seems awesome, but that's probably unattainable for me.
Right. No, 14-year-old Tony was doing the same things and envisioning success on the playground, or we played out in the front yard a whole lot. and I liked kind of being the guy that would coach or look at stats or, organize things. So the things or traits that I think were somewhat of strengths, or at least of interest to me, were the things I was passionate about. And ultimately, all of us want to go to work and get a paycheck so we can keep food on the table or whatever it might be. And in a perfect world, we would like to earn that paycheck by not working, by doing something that if you're passionate about or it stems from your interests, I think you're not really going to work every day. You're going to do what you like to do, or hopefully what you love to do. And so those things spilled over. But at the same time, 14-year-old would be like, man, you got lucky. And I never would have envisioned being able to do some of the things that I get to do. But it came from just kind of pushing forward. We've had some magical moments in our program that I wish I could say we coached them, or we told the guy, we told Max Ferguson to hit a walk-off homer or things like that. But those plays just come organically when you're trying to win or you're moving forward, you're pushing forward. And there were so many days in my life I could have quit baseball or quit pushing forward. But I had good people around me that encouraged me and lifted me up. And, now I'm in a seat that I would have envied as a 14-year-old, and maybe even would have thought, that sounds cool, but that's not really possible.
Definitely. Yeah, I was also thinking about was it Zane that hit the late homer against Clemson?
Yeah, with 2 strikes, and didn't really look good earlier in the at bat. And that is a parallel to the team. We didn't really look good early in the year. But you can either, especially in our league, you're swimming with the sharks. So it's kill or be killed. And in our league, you're not always going to be the one who kills, or the one who wins is a better way to say it. But if you keep pressing on and you keep trying to solve problems and figure things out and you keep working, then the percentages are going to sway in your favor. It's going to be like you're the casino. More times than not, you're going to win out. You just have to be willing to go through those times where you take a hit or you take a loss.
Yeah. Well, something I ask everybody on the show is, tell me one unforgettable sports memory for you. And I like to make it clear that it doesn't have to be as a coach, or it can be as an athlete, or it could be as a spectator, just something that, when you're 90 years old, you can close your eyes and you can picture it super
Yeah.
clear.
Well, a state championship in high school. Now, it was soccer. So I know a lot of our guys I coached that played football or only baseball will tease me about soccer, but a sport that my dad coached in high school, and to win a state championship with family was huge. And by family, I do mean my sisters, my mom, my dad, everyone was a part of that program. But our team became family in the hallways of the high school. After hours, we would always go over to each other's houses and hang in between workouts or whatever it might be. And you don't always get to win a state championship. The team we beat was Taylor Twellman was on, who is now the best announcer, color guy, or just spokesman for American soccer. So it's not like the other team wasn't family as well. But to have that moment was incredible. And I'm nowhere the athlete Michael Jordan was, but I remember when he won one, it might have been his first, or I think it might have been the one he won after his dad passed away. He was hugging that trophy like crazy, and all the emotions were spilling over. And that's kind of how that moment was for us, me included. But another magical moment that didn't have anything to do with winning was just me finally getting my first career start in Division I baseball. It took forever. And just seeing the satisfaction and the pride on my dad's face after the game. I still remember some of the words he said, but those weren't as important as just that look and that vibe between us. It made a lot of the hard work worth it. And again, it was one of those moments that I'll remember until that moment you mentioned, because it didn't require a trophy or a medal.
Absolutely. And you talking about the broadcaster, it leads me into a really quick speed round I want to do with you.
Okay.
And I can let you go soon, but so these are about players that you have coached at Tennessee. And one of them is, who do you think would make a great announcer, great broadcaster for baseball?
Well, Kirby Cannell is going to be one of the announcers for, our home run derby we're about to have. He just has a personality that really could do well in any area. But Luke Lipsius and Evan Russell are two of the best interviewees I've ever been around. And I think if you can kind of use words in a way with a microphone in front of you, then you're probably pretty good at that. So those two guys stick out. And maybe Luke Lipsius can call one of his brother's games, Andre, who just made his major league debut.
Yeah, absolutely. Just heard about that getting called up. And I will tell you this. So just really quick, it's putting a pause on the speed round. I've done a lot of NIL events with different athletes, and I may have told you this at the yoga event that we did together. But the baseball players, and you mentioning Evan is what makes me think of it, because he was just so outstanding. But more so than any other sport at Tennessee, the baseball players are always the best to work with, the most helpful, it's almost like they have the best idea of helping a business get their return on investment. And I'm sure that has to do with some of the work you're doing behind the scenes.
I appreciate that, and I hope that's true. We have such a huge support staff, and I think they show tremendous interest in our kids' lives, not just their baseball career. And so maybe that kind of spins it over into them taking an interest in how other people are doing. But I think a lot of it is we get kids from great families, and then also our guys really appreciate how the program has been lifted up by a group effort, literally a group effort. It's donors, it's fans, it's administration, and things like that. But over in Nashville for our football game at the neutral site, a young lady told me the same thing that you said, and nothing makes me feel better, especially because of the narrative out there that, we've played with too much of an edge at times or did this or that. Again, I think there's separation of the two. One's business and the other's personal. And when our guys are asked to be personal, they do a phenomenal job at it.
Yeah, no question. So back to it. Funniest guy you've ever coached?
That's hard to say. The funniest group I've ever coached is the group Max Scherzer was a part of their pitching staff. They call themselves the Cartel now, which is a little over dramatic. But the bottom line is they're a posse that always gets together, and obviously they have Max's career to rally around. But Taylor Parker, just by law percentages, he's a left-handed pitcher. So any of us that have coached or trained lefties, we know they have a tendency to be a little unique, and he's incredibly unique. But when you say as many words as Taylor did, some of them are going to be funny. You could put them in a bunch of different boxes again. So just law percentages, he probably said the most funny things because he talked the most.
Who would make the best coach?
Ooh, that's interesting. I think any catcher that I've ever been around, and that's one of the reasons I'm really excited that Coach Elander is still with us, and I was excited to hire him. Was he was a catcher when I was able to coach him. But I just feel when you have the whole field in front of you, and you have to be the point guard, and you also have to have rapport with the pitchers and the coaching staff's asking so much of you. Just all those guys in those positions have to do a great job. And I'm taking the easy way out because I don't have one direct answer. That's the most vague answer. The most specific is Camden Sewell becoming a coach instead of a businessman was a decision he made after this last season. And I'm just excited that he's still around the game. And I think he's learned a lot of lessons on and off the field. And I'm glad he's getting to kickstart his career.
Which player could best talk their way out of a speeding ticket?
Probably Evan Russell, who we mentioned before. There were a lot of big personalities on that 22 team. Trey Lipscomb could probably charm his way out of one. Evan Russell and Nico Masha are two guys that were always lawyers. They started more arguments down there than you could ever imagine. So those two could probably talk their way out of one. But I've also coached some guys that could probably charm their way out of one, like Mr. Lipscomb.
Yeah. Well, here's the opposite of charming is you do not have a daughter. However, if you did, what is one player that you would least want to date her?
Well, I'm laughing because Trey Lipscomb was the guy, because I've got nieces that are starting to get a little older and in college and whatnot. Trey Lipscomb was the guy who I just mentioned. I would brag about. He's the one I would let, one of them date. But as time went on, I changed my mind on that. So he might be a 2-for-1 in that situation. I've also seen some of our guys carry a lot of drama. So some of those guys come to mind. But the best Christmas gift I've ever seen one of our guys get was Liam Spence got a synopsis of girls he's dated, and there was some other things added to it. So Liam Spence might be my final answer for some reasons that will stay in house. Not because he's a bad guy, I can promise you that.
Just some of the intel that you were privy to.
Just the work that was put in by Redmond Walsh for that Christmas gift alone made it pretty epic. So one of many good memories I've had up at this facility.
Well, real quick, and again, I can let you go here in just a sec. What is one thing you have learned about yourself since taking the head coaching job?
I got a lot to learn. And it's one of many lessons. I think one thing for me is balance has always been something I've kind of been fighting for in my life. And there's better ways to balance, even doing this job where you're supposed to have a hand in everything. One of those ways is to delegate. So I do have a lot to learn. And if I'm not an expert in one area, go ahead and take a step back and let the person that you hired, because you think they're tremendous at what they do, let them take over it and relax and trust that they're going to do what's best. And that's been part of my process. And one of the reasons we hired Frank Anderson here is because he has head coaching experience. And he and our video coordinator, Sean McCann, have been my counsel every day. And because I have a lot to learn, I ask a lot of questions of them. And it's just because of where I stand or whatever, it's been interesting or intriguing how I've gotten some credit where it's not deserved, or I've been asked to do this podcast, or I could be standing next to Jordan Beck and I also get asked for an autograph, which is insane because that guy's going to be a major league all-star. So it's been fun, but I'm very blessed.
I saw that, and just in the way I saw that your favorite movies on a personal level were Shawshank and Dumb and Dumber. Is that right?
Yeah, no question. Two ends of the spectrum there, but
right. But I wanted to ask, last question, favorite baseball movie?
That's so hard because there's so many classics. I think baseball has been covered about as well as anyone. For me, I'm kind of more corny than some people know. Some people know I'm too. Field of Dreams is just kind of that nostalgia, rich tradition, father-son kind of playing catch. I think it's the best father-son sport going. It's not like any of the other ones are doing anything wrong. So that one stands out. But man, there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah. Well, you're saying corny. I thought in your Cubs past, you're going to go Rookie of the Year.
So here's where someone might slash my tires. I've never seen Rookie of the Year. I think that might have come out either when I was playing or when I first started coaching. And I was so bad at both that I had to go underground for a few years. So there was about a 6-7 year window in my life where I was either in the cage, the weight room, or trying to figure out how to recruit and things like that. I was in the office. So I think that might have fallen in that window. So sorry, Cubs fans or Rookie of the Year fans.
Yeah.
But also that movie seemed really corny. So I might have selected some others before that one.
It is, and it has one of the most underrated comedic performances. Actually, Daniel Stern. He's in the movie, and he's just a ridiculous pitching coach, but it's so stupid that it's undeniably funny.
Well, to prove my corniness, my favorite effort out of him is Home Alone. I mean, it's a no-brainer. But second favorite is City Slickers, which is a movie I'm a big fan of, and I bring it up to our players. But that's a waste of time. None of those guys have ever seen that.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to tell my kids that Daniel Stern is the voice in Wonder Years, and that's hard to grasp.
Great show, though. Great show.
Absolutely. Coach Tony Vitello, thank you so much for joining me. Best of luck this season.
Yeah, been a blast. Thank you so much.